You should always say what it is, but right now I'm going to get rid of that. Okay, and NetBeans nicely sets me up with main. We need a 17 by 17 board because we're going to make a board of blanks, not really blanks, but spaces, and we're going to put these lines, and then we're going to put some numbers in there. We need the numbers because we want our user to be able to say, I want to put an X in 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So this is what we have to make. So this is a two-dimensional array of characters. So car, two-dimensional array, its name, I said board equals new car, and we said, I think 17 by 17. It can't print it out because right now it's full of nulls. What will happen with null? It doesn't take up as much space as, for instance, these character 1, 2, and 3. So it will look something like this. There's nothing between these two top lines. So if there's a number in there, then your number 1, let's do a number 4. Your number 4 is then going to throw that line off. The spacing is going to be all wrong if you let it default to a null space character. So what we have to do is put a space in there. We have to make every one of these blank spaces. So if I do that, how do I do a line, a row of blank spaces? I'm going to be using these things called row and column a lot. So I'm just going to declare row and column up here so I don't have to keep writing it out. So for row, so let's say it's row 5. So on row 5 then, we're going to go all the way around row 5, and the column is going to change from 0 to including 16, and we're going to put a blank in there. So all the way along a particular row, in this case row 5, we're going to put blanks in there. I'm not going to worry about these horizontal and vertical lines yet. I'm going to fill the whole thing with blanks, and then I'm going to replace some of them with these lines. It's much easier than trying to calculate where these lines go and filling in everything around the numbers and the lines. The easier way is to put all blanks in first and then replace the lines and then replace the numbers. So I'm going to fill it up with blanks. So this one says for a particular row number, go all the way along the row putting in blanks. But I want this to happen for all rows from row 0, not just for row 5, but all rows from 0 through 16, which is where this line comes from. So now if I make that a row, this is a doubly nested loop. The only thing, if you like, the only thing in the internal loop is this for loop, and so I can put all of these, if that makes you happier, makes you feel safer, makes you understand it better, that's fine. You don't actually need any of these. You need this one on line 18, but you don't need any of the others braces in there. So I fill it up with spaces. I can similarly use the same doubly nested loop to print it out. And I'm going to print my board row column. Okay, so what do we expect to see in output? Let's run it and see. Too much, did I? But the reason why is because I'm printing out something that's blank. Let's just make sure that this works. Let's fill it not with blanks, but with some character. And now I want to see a whole bunch of M's. There we go. It didn't quite look the way I wanted it to. And that's because I never went down to a new line with my print statement. So let's figure that out. I want to, this inner loop here prints out a row, and when I finished my loop printing my row, I want to do a print line. But within the external loop. So let's try that. Okay, good. So it looks like, doesn't quite look square, and that's because of the spaces between the rows. And that's something that the compiler or NetBeans is doing. I can't change that. I could make it look better if maybe I put a space after each of these M's, but right now I'm not really concerned with making it look prettier. I can deal with that later. As long as I've got 17 M's in a row and 17 rows, I'm happy for now. Then, so I can go back to not putting my M's, but putting spaces. And now what I want to do is, and I'm not going to go anymore in NetBeans, but I'm going to go to here. Because I want to print one of these, I don't want to print, I want to make one of these lines on my board. So just as on here we had this doubly nested loop, this inner loop went along a row putting a space in there. So we want to go along a row putting a space. In other words, we need the columns to change. So I can say so I want to change the columns. So I want to change I want the column to start at 0. So here I am on a particular row altering the column. So I want to make my board some row. Let me make it an actual row 5, say. I think I need that. Okay, so here's a loop that for every column on row 5 puts that's a hyphen, So it puts this line in on row 5. I don't say it's row 5 you got to calculate that, and you actually need it on 2 rows. You have to have 2 loops, 2 separate loops. You cannot do these lines in a doubly nested loop. There's going to be a single loop and a single loop. And then similarly for the lines. But in this case, it's the rows that are going to be changing and the column that is fixed. And once you've done that, print that out, make sure that you get something that looks like this, and then you're ready to put these 1, 2, 3, etc. up to 9. Biggest mistake students make is they want this to be an integer. So they say something like board, and I don't know these numbers, I'm just picking numbers out of my head. So the 5 and the 6 are not correct, but they say something like this. And you cannot do that because 3 is an integer, and this board cell here needs a character. So what you have to do is make this the character 3 and not the integer 3. So then you need to put the 9 of them in, and you can't do that in a loop at all. It's going to be 9 separate statements.